Hello, everyone. For today, I have a little rules review. I haven't done these in a little while, and it's always nice to have these on the channel. Talk about certain games. Today, I want to talk about Horizon Wars, since Julie and I have been talking about getting a little bit more into sci-fi games, bringing a few sci-fi games to the channel, in addition to fantasy. So, Horizon Wars is a science fiction combined arms war game. So you have vehicles, infantry, you have mechs, aircraft, all kinds of stuff that you can use uh, to construct your forces. The book is the author is Robbie Jenkins, and the publisher is Osprey Publishing. Good hardcover rule book. Okay, and nice. I've had this for a while. Nice binding, and it's still in very good condition. Well-made book. So, book is also in full color, and I'm gonna skip here. So, basically, what you need to play. This book has no miniatures line associated with it, so you can use any miniatures you want, or any miniatures you have. The book is designed for smaller scales. That is, the rules are designed for smaller scales. So anything from 6 millimeters, 10 millimeters, 15 millimeters, and so forth. I have seen people play with larger models, but it's definitely designed for small scale warfare. Also, interesting, you'll need 12-sided dice. It is a mechanic that goes on, that works with 12-sided dice, and the book recommends that you use about 10 12-sided dice. And so you probably also want a handful of counters, of course, measuring tape, and your miniatures, and any terrain that you have as well. So, book goes into mustering your forces. That's sort of the first thing that they go into, and it has very good artwork with a combination of art and photos of models. I love that. And here is a nice art representation of a mech and some infantry. One interesting thing is there's something called force presence. That's basically the points values that you're going to use. Very low point values in this game, and there's a little table that tells you how long your games would approximately take depending on your force presence. So if you use 7 points, you're going to probably be playing a 30-minute game. And if you're using 25 points, the game will be about 2 hours. So it kind of gives you a nice little idea of, okay, how many points are we going to play? How long is this game going to be? And I like games that do this. I like rule sets that do this. The units in the game are defined as elements. So we don't call them units, we call them elements. And then there is a battle group, which is your main force, and that is comprised of various elements. Each element has about 5 stats, including presence, movement, firepower, armor or agility, and defense. So it's interesting. It's not a lot of stats. There's not a lot of a tremendous amount of record keeping. It's a little bit of record keeping as normal, but nothing like major. So it's a pretty good, simple rule set. And then it goes on to describe, of course, the different stats and what they mean. You go in. You have a turn section. So this describes a little bit of your turn and the use of action tokens. You're gonna want something to mark your actions. All right, it is a system that uses actions and action tokens. And then you have a section that describes, right after the turn section, describes your actions and reactions. Now, one interesting mechanic is that you get 2 actions per turn, but you can hold 1 action in order to use it as a reaction later in the turn. Now, that's interesting. So, and there are rules for that. And then the book, one nice thing about these rules is that it gives you page numbers for any of these like terms. So for example, they mention reactions here for the first time. So they give you a page number. So this way you're not guessing. You're going back and forth through the rules. You know, if you want to know, okay, how does the reaction work? Well, you just follow page 33 and then read that, then come back to this, you know. So it's pretty good in terms of reading. It's a good read. It's really not bad at all. And of course, it goes through a list of things that you can do, like move and shoot, charge, do nothing, and recover. So the book explains all that. Now, the shooting section is worth noting. One very interesting mechanic here. It's going to tell you, you know, declare your target and then check range. One interesting thing about that is that you will use your measured range, the range that you measure to the target, to calculate a stat called effective range. And this is what determines your hits in the game. Now, it sounds complicated. It really isn't. It's very simple. What it is you measure to your target like you would in any war game, and say if that target is 8 inches away, you're going to modify that 8 inches usually by adding the target's armor. So the armor is going to modify that number, and any cover bonuses will also modify that armor. Now, if the target is in the open with no cover, then all you use is the target's armor. So that's what determines your hit. And that's interesting. I just find that to be a very interesting system. In order to determine how many dice the attacking element is going to use its fire stat. That's going to tell you how many 12-sided dice you're going to use. And then the defender, whoever's being shot at, is going to use their defense stat to determine how many dice they're going to use to defend. And this is another interesting thing, because the defender has to roll equal to whatever the attacker rolls in order to defend against those hits. So, for example, if I rolled, let's say, an 8, then the defender has to roll another 8 in order to cancel that out, right? So in a situation where I rolled, let's say, an 8, right, an 11, and say a 2, and the defender rolls, let's say, an 8, that's probably not going to happen, but I'll say an 11 and then a 9. Basically, the numbers that are the same, you remove them. So that's how defending player kind of blocks the hits. And then whatever, if there is another dice, let's say, that has beaten the effective range, then that dice goes through as a hit, right? It has to match exactly for the defender to be able to remove fire dice. And that's, again, it's interesting. I find that interesting. And of course, damage is applied according to how many hits went through, how many hits the defender wasn't able to roll equal to. So then those hits become damage, and the damage, there is a damage track for each element, and as an element takes damage, its active stats are also reduced. So meaning the element gets weaker as it takes more damage. So that's pretty cool. It's an interesting system for sure. And of course, they give you a shooting example. So they go through everything step by step. There are a couple of special abilities here that they throw in. and then other actions like moving and shooting, charging, and how to resolve a charge. Pretty cool. If you decide to do nothing, recovering, what that means. So damage elements may perform a recover action. Okay, and again, you have some nice artwork here giving you ideas for a table setup. Okay, so here we have the section on reactions, and then it's page 33, and they go through the whole reaction mechanic. So that's interesting, and I like that about Horizon Wars, the fact that you can hold off one of your actions and then use it as a reaction. There are rules for that, though. You just gotta follow the rules. Then we have a section on aircraft, and that's awesome because, of course, I love playing with aircraft. And surprisingly, I've never used aircraft in my Horizon War games in the past. So when Julie and I play, that's something we're definitely going to include and test out. So I'll have to reread the aircraft rules to become familiar. But you have basically with diagrams, they describe how aircraft move, basic maneuvers, and more complex maneuvers like banking. There's even landing aircraft and taking off, aircraft taking off. So that's interesting. That's called advanced maneuvers. And you have transport aircraft as well, which is cool because I always like having like a large aircraft that maybe transport tanks or mechs or whatever. Okay, and then there's aircraft combat. And there's the eject rule. It has a section on terrain, which is towards the middle of the book, interestingly enough. And it goes through all the different kinds of terrain and how it's used in the game. And again, look at that. Look at that artwork. That's just awesome. That is one nice mech there. So, very nice book. Really does inspire your imagination. We go through all the various categories of terrain, including swamps and roads and protected sites, that sort of thing. And then there is a table here for events, and that has to do with artifacts. Perhaps like the wreck of an alien spacecraft or something. I haven't really gone over these rules very much, this aspect of the rules. But then it summarizes all of the terrain, which is great. And now we go into making your armies, mustering your armies. And that's interesting that it's towards the back of the book. It starts on page 37. So it goes through all the rules on how to construct your armies in the Horizon Wars. And one important thing is the CHQ or the command unit, basically, and that determines how many other units of the different categories you can have and how many points. And then mechs, and that's an interesting section to me because I love mechs. And mechs are categorized in 3 basic categories: light, medium, and heavy. And it gives you the points value or presence value. I think that's what that stands for, the presence. And so for each category, you get a certain number of points that you can use to allocate to your stats, your move, your fire, your armor, and your defense. That's cool. So it's like you are going to be building your mech from scratch, you know. There are no like in most war games you'll have a specific mech, then the stats for that specific mech. In here, you're actually constructing your mech. You're deciding how many points go towards move, towards fire, whatever, and that decides how good your mech is. I thought that was really interesting, you know. And there are rules for that, and there are upgrades, and there you can even upgrade the frames to your mech, so there are tables for that. Command upgrades. Okay. So then there are some upgrades for your conventional forces, things like infantry and artillery and that sort of thing. And there's a section just for aircraft upgrades. So that's cool. Now the confrontation section, that starts right after page 70. And that's basically all of the scenarios. Okay, and they have like the little maps. And then they have all of the things that are going to be going on for the attacker and the defender, the table size, and then whether it's a patrol or a troop or a squadron. It's interesting. So, interesting scenario play, interesting design for the scenarios. And you get a few scenarios. Here are the little table maps and everything. And then you get like adventure scenarios, which are more narrative. I guess this would be more campaign oriented. And then there's something called Momentum, which I have to read more about. But it takes place in adventure scenarios. So very cool. And then there's a table here that you have to roll on that determines your momentum and all this other stuff. So there is narrative encounters, and I'm thinking that's single scenarios with more narrative to them. There's a nice city art there with some mechs confronting each other. And then, interesting, and in many war game books that I have seen, that I have read, this section is in the beginning. Well, this is all the fluff, basically the fluff. This is a short history of the future, and it gives you fluff, and it's all the way in the back. So that's interesting. It's just interesting way of organizing. And it talks about the colonial wars and everything else. So that gives you ideas for framing your scenarios. Okay, you got a cool mech right there. I just love these mech pictures more than anything, I think. And then, so again, this is more fluff. You have several pages of fluff. The Age of Expansion. Battles in some extreme areas. For example, battles in the dark. Areas of low gravity, high gravity. That's pretty cool. Then you have your appendices and, of course, your play summary, which is like your quick reference page that you use. I usually copy this. And at the very end, you have your army roster sheet. So, and again, it's not very complicated at all. And you just fill in your different elements for your army, for your battle group. And that's it. That's where the book ends. It's only one book, and that's it. So hopefully Julie and I will be experimenting with this. And I have quite a few miniatures that I'll be using for this. And as we get closer to playing this, I'll show a video showing the different miniatures that I use for this game. And who knows, maybe even some sculptures. All right, folks, thank you very much. And this has been an overview of the game Horizon Wars.